Hi all, this is Xander. This is part 3 of my video series. Um, so in the previous video, I talked about my new church, the church that I started attending in 1984 when I was about 19 or 20 years old. Um, yeah, so this church was for me like a substitute family. This is where I probably should talk about my own personal, my human family. So I began to realize at around the age of 19 or 20 that something was wrong with my parents and something was wrong with my entire family, my parents and my brothers. And that it was very toxic, and there was just something wrong with my parents' behavior towards me. That was when I became the family scapegoat in my narcissistic family. That's when I really became the scapegoat. My father, where he should have stepped in and done his fatherly duties, did not. He was neglectful. But my mother was worse. She was emotionally abusive to me. Starting when I was 20, she became chronically emotionally abusive towards me. And in the past couple of years, I've asked the Holy Spirit, how bad was it? And what I've come up with, like, how many times did she criticize? My mother would criticize me constantly, or what felt like constant. And I asked the Holy Spirit, how many times has she criticized me to my face? And the Holy Spirit said from the time I was 20 to the time I was 57, which was 4 years ago, she criticized me a total of 3,046 times, and that is an average of once every 4 to 5 days. She put me down. And it started when I was 20 and continued all through my 20s, nonstop, just nonstop from my mom. And it took a very heavy toll on me emotionally and mentally. And I didn't know what to do about it. I wanted to, at that time, I wanted to change my name. And I also wanted to, at the time, I wanted to leave my family and become a ward of the state, like quite literally. I wanted to disassociate from my family and become a ward of the state so that I didn't have to deal with them anymore. And I was looking for ways to get out from under them, because it was really bad. So that was going on at home, but in church, I was part of this church now. And for 2 or 3 years, they stayed in the small church, the schoolhouse church, and it was fine. But then they started to build a new church. The pastor started to talk to us about building a bigger sanctuary. And so he started raising money from the people in the church. I didn't have much money, so I didn't give much. But anyways, so they built the church, they built a new sanctuary, they got rid of the schoolhouse after 2 or 3 years of me being there. And the first thing that they did in the church when they got there was they told the tambourine guy to stop playing the tambourine, stop bringing the tambourine to church. We don't want to hear it because we want new people to come in the church and be comfortable, and we don't want them to be weirded out by some guy playing a tambourine, so he stopped. And that took some of the spontaneity out of it. Also, they shut down the spontaneous gifts of the Spirit. They didn't shut them down completely, but they used 1 Corinthians 14, verse 40. They used that verse to shut down the spontaneity. And they, please go read it online, 1 Corinthians 14, verse 40, where it says that there should be order in the church and that the spiritual gifts should be done in order. There was probably a good reason for that, because they built this bigger sanctuary. Now, instead of having 100 people, they had 300 people in the same room. And it was hard for the people who had the spiritual gifts to hear each other. And so they would begin to speak over each other. So that was probably a good idea. Unfortunately, it dampened all the spontaneity. And the spiritual singing that we used to do, that stopped completely. Also, when we moved into when they had the new sanctuary, that was when the pastor began to tell us that we had to be at church 3 times a week. And that we could not have spiritual growth in our lives, and we could not be good Christians unless we came to his church 3 times a week. Now, apparently, this is what is done in Southern churches, and he had been to a Southern Bible college for his master's degree, and so this is what they do apparently in Southern churches, so he thought it would be a good idea to do it in his church, to have people come 3 times a week. So he would have us come on once on the weekends, once on Thursday nights, and then he started what they called home groups. Now they call them cell groups. He started a bunch of home groups, and he would say, you have to go to one of the home groups once a week. So I thought that this is what I needed to do to be a good Christian and to be a member in good standing at his church. So this is what I began to do, and that it created problems with my Catholic family, but at the time, I didn't care. I used that, there's a passage in the Bible where Jesus says, he who loves mother or father or wife or husband or son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And I used that as justification to attend this church 3 times a week, because I thought that was loving God more than your family. So I thought that was being worthy in Jesus's eyes to prioritize your church family more than your human family. So I began to attend that church 3 times a week religiously. Like, I can count on my hand the number of times that I missed a church service, okay? And I did that for 6 years at that church, from 1984 to 1990. But there started to be a problem. The more I attended that church, the more I began to listen to what the pastor was teaching. And I started to have a problem with what he was teaching out of the Bible. And I didn't understand where he was coming from with his interpretations. And I would walk out of the church just, what did I just hear? I didn't understand it. I didn't understand his background. I didn't understand where these weird interpretations of the Bible were coming from. And what I realized later was that he was trained at Columbia Bible College, which is a very evangelical Bible college, now a university. And he was trained by evangelicals to interpret the Bible in an evangelical way. The problem was that when I had read the Bible as a young teenager, I saw the Bible in a different way. I didn't see it through an evangelical lens. I saw it through the Holy Spirit's eyes. So he would teach on a certain Bible verse and say that it meant a certain thing, but it contradicted what I knew. What the Holy Spirit had taught me. And it says in the Bible, Jesus says the Holy Spirit will teach you. So I bought it. I bought into that. The Holy Spirit will teach me. Okay, let's do it. But it contradicted what my pastor was teaching on a regular basis. And I really had problems with my pastor's teachings. And I would sit there and he would teach something and I would squirm in my seat and feel uncomfortable. And because my brain is like a topical reference Bible, I file things away under topics. And he would say something on a certain topic and I would think, yeah, but the Bible also says this about that topic. And it also says that thing about that topic, in contradiction to what he was teaching. So I had real problems with my pastor's teachings because they were evangelical, but they were not what I understood to be biblical. So that was happening. And then in 1990, I made a fateful decision. So my pastor used to promote service, that in order to be a good Christian and a good church member, you have to serve here. Okay, this is also a very evangelical thing. Service. You have to do something of service to your church. You can't just attend 3 times a week. You have to come another time and do something that is service-oriented. And in 1990, I made a fateful decision in one of the semesters. They had it divided up into fall and spring, that you would sign up for an area of service and do it for 13 weeks. And normally, I signed up for like the least stressful area of service. I would fold church bulletins. I would come maybe once a week. I would come once a week and I would fold the church bulletins with a bunch of other people. And that was my service. But one year, 1990, I decided to do 4 at the same time. It was nuts. But I thought, I'm really going to get into this, right? I'm really going to be a loyal church member. And I ended up doing 4 areas of service at the same time. And I ended up burning myself out. And the problem is that nobody in the church noticed. Nobody was keeping track of what I signed up for. Nobody was checking in with me to see if I was okay with any of this. Nobody paid attention at all. And I believe that sometime around 1990, around the time that I did these 4 areas, I believe that I also contracted chronic fatigue syndrome. I don't think that it was burnout, yes. It was fatigue, yes. I also believe it was traumatic for me, but I also believe that I contracted chronic fatigue syndrome from somebody. And I asked the Holy Spirit, in the past few years, I've asked the Holy Spirit what it was, the fatigue that I felt afterwards. And they said that I had contracted something like Epstein-Barr syndrome from a person in the church that I was exposed to. And that what happens, I learned later, what happens is Epstein-Barr virus, you have it, but then it leaves your body, but it doesn't leave completely. And it leaves certain traces that cause the chronic fatigue syndrome. And that's what happened to me. And so after that, that 13-week semester where I did 4 areas of service at the same time, this was in 1990. Or no, this was in, it was in 1990. After that, I stopped going to church. And for 4 years, from 90 to 94, I was only able to attend church like 3 times a year because I was so tired. And it wasn't just, I used to wake up on a Sunday morning and I used to think, I would wake up and I would be in bed and think, gotta go to church. Come on, body, let's go to church. And I couldn't move. I literally couldn't move. My body was paralyzed. I think that was trauma, but it could have also been the chronic fatigue because I was also experiencing the chronic fatigue while I was at work during the week, at my job. And I had to eventually quit my full-time job partly because of the fatigue. Not completely, but partly. So anyways, for 4 years, from 90 to 94, I only attended 3 times during the year. So that was 12 times. So that happened. Also, I realized that my pastor was not teaching us the Bible. I was not learning the Bible from this guy. I was only learning evangelical teachings, which were not helpful. And the pastor was, he was yelling at people. He was yelling at people from the pulpit about certain things, telling people who were what you would consider snowflakes that they shouldn't be snowflakes about certain things. Also, he would complain that people were complaining to him about his not teaching the Bible, and he would yell at them and say, that is not what this church is about. This church is about winning souls for Christ, which is very evangelical. But he would say basically, it's not my job to teach you the Bible. And I found out later he had a very financial reason for that. Also, there were certain incidents in the church that hurt me, where people hurt me. So I had church hurt, what they call church hurt. But eventually, I didn't leave the church for those reasons. I didn't leave the church because of his lousy teaching. I didn't leave the church over church hurt. I left the church because I was starting to have major doubts about God and about Christianity. And my pastor was not addressing those doubts from the pulpit. And I didn't know who to go ask about my doubts. I was afraid. I was becoming aware that the atmosphere in the church was very narrow-minded. It was becoming more and more evangelical as the years passed. And I didn't feel comfortable sharing that I had doubts with other Christians. It was just the atmosphere there was not conducive to that. You toed the party line, and you stuck to the script. You stuck to the evangelical narrative, and that was it. And I was having major doubts, and I realized that I can't share this with anybody at this church. It's not safe. I'm not safe sharing my doubts and still staying in the church. It's not safe. So I left the church because I was becoming a skeptic. I was becoming very doubtful of Christianity, and I wanted to know why I believed what I believed, and nobody was teaching me that. Nobody was addressing that. Now, I found out later there are churches in the United States where they care about those things, where the pastor and the staff care to explain to people why they believe what they believe. And they actually have programs, and they're called apologetics. There's a name in the church for what I wanted to learn, and it's called apologetics. The only problem is they only teach apologetics in Christian colleges or in Bible schools or theology schools. They don't teach apologetics in the church to normal people, regular people like me. They don't teach that stuff. Maybe this many people in the United States teach apologetics in their church. And good luck finding them, because I couldn't find any. I know they exist. I found out later that those churches do exist, but there were none in my area. So in January 1994, 10 years after I came to that church, I left. And I remember the day that I left. I remember it like it was yesterday. The church service was over, and I went and leaned up against a windowsill, and I crossed my arms like this, and I was looking at these people doing their church thing, doing their social thing, and I went, I'm done here. That's it. It's over. And I walked out, and I never came back. Well, I did come back later, but that's for later. I walked out and decided that my relationship with this church was over. And I decided that what I needed was, because of my narcissistic family, I was in need of emotional healing. And I was in deep need of emotional healing, and I was in need of guidance and direction and wisdom for my life. And I was not getting it from my parents, and I was not getting it from the church. And so I decided I was going to go look for guidance, wisdom, and direction for my life and for emotional healing. And I was going to look for it outside the church. And I was not going to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist because they didn't. I went to counselors and they didn't have answers. Okay? And I did have a counselor at the time, from the time I was about 20, from the time that my mom's emotional abuse started. I did have a counselor. He was a Christian, but it didn't work out with him. It didn't work out. We had differences. So in 1994, I left, and I started to explore the New Age. I did not get involved with any New Age groups or therapies back in 1994. I just started to read about it. I used to go into health food stores, and they would have these New Age type magazines that would talk about New Age health therapies. And I started to read the magazines. I would just eat it up, just read one after the other, and explore New Age therapies. And I did that for 3 years, reading on New Age therapies. And at the time, I didn't go to any psychics or tarot readers at the time. I just stayed home. I stopped reading my Bible, and I just would read about New Age therapies. That was all I did for 3 years, 94 to 97. So I'm going to stop here and continue with another video where I'll continue my story. Thank you for listening. God bless. Bye-bye.